Hey there, friends. So I think there was a misunderstanding. Did the American public want equity when it came to the U.S. military? Let's talk about that. First, guys, go check out my friends, Mission First Tactical. That's Mission First Tactical. These guys have some incredible stuff. Personally, my favorite is their new Acro CCW bags. These bags are freaking awesome. They have a very subtle look to them. They don't have an overly tactical appeal to them. So even if you are carrying, it's not going to make you stand out, if you know what I mean. They also have their brand new translucent EXD magazines. These things are unbelievable. A little bit more detail on those in a future video you'll have coming up from me. And also backup iron sights. These are some legitimate backup iron sights. These are metal, not those cheap plastic ones that you see from some of the guys out there. And then they have tons of other things like gun parts and holsters. Check them out. MissionFirstTactical.com. Again, MissionFirstTactical.com. Use my discount code FTATF. Again, my world famous discount code of FTATF will get you money off at the time of checkout. Friends, we're looking at some really weird signs that are happening right now. And I think that as Americans, we should all at least be paying attention. We are obviously in that follow-up to, or that move up to, the election cycle in November. And at this point, everything should be considered in play. We still don't know exactly who the Republican nominee is going to be because things could happen. We still don't know who the Democrat nominee could be because things could happen. I understand officially both parties have their nominations. Just hear what I'm saying, right? There's a lot of other things outside of the election cycle, and as you guys know, everything is intertwined at some point or another. It crisscrosses at some point. We're seeing some alarming things happening right now, and things happen for a reason. Decisions are made for a reason. New laws are implemented, or at least introduced, for a reason. Let's talk about some of those. Lawmakers moved to automate selective service registration for all men. Now, this is not exactly earth-shattering because men who turn 18 years of age in the United States are already required to register for selective service, essentially the draft. Now, we haven't had a draft since, I believe, 1973. So it's a super long shot that we would have one anytime soon, but hear me out on this. This process now, again, this part doesn't draw a lot of alarm to me, some alarm it does, but nevertheless, people are encouraged to sign up for the draft selective service. They aren't really made to. You know what I mean? There's phone calls that are made, there's visits that are made, there's recruitment things and all that kind of stuff that military makes to high schools and even colleges. So there's efforts, but real loose efforts, like nobody's really pushing it. Obviously, as soon as I turned 18, I registered for selective service, and most people have. A lot of people do not. So there's an automation process that the federal government has already put in place that says all of your information is already being collected somewhere. And we all know this, right? Let's not be naive about this. The information is absolutely collected. They've already got it. So they're now going to use that information that they already have. Let's call it a people registration. In the gun community, we call registration of guns a gun registration. Let's call this a people registration. So now you are registered with the federal government, and it's going to be an automated process. This bill is making its way through Congress. It will likely pass simply because not really no harm, no foul, although you've got people who probably still will oppose that because something is happening without their, quote, consent, even though it is the law to do that. But let's move a little bit more into question mark town, right? Things that don't make sense and things that make us ask, why are they doing this? Let's take a look at the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2025 by the U.S. Senate Committee on Armed Services. Now, this again comes from the Senate, right? The Senate has already made these recommendations. It obviously has to pass the House, and of course the, I don't even know how to call him, the president, the potato in the White House still has to sign this into law. But nevertheless, this has made its way through the Senate and will make its way to the House very soon. If I move all the way down to number 3 in this, I want you to take a look and pay particular attention where this is strategically placed, as if it's not really a big deal and goes in with all the good news, all right? We look at the first bullet point where they talk about a big raise for military members. Second bullet point, increase basic monthly pay for junior enlisted service members, another good raise. Third bullet point, amends the Military Selective Service Act to require the registration of women for selective service. Then we move on to number Wait a minute. What was number 3 again? Amends the Military Selective Service Act to require the registration of women for selective service. Okay, that's never happened before. In fact, we've got a Supreme Court justice chosen by our current president, and he chose her only because she is a black woman and a black person. That's why he chose her, not because she's smart, not because she was the best candidate. He said before he chose her why he was going to pick her, black and woman. She can't identify what a woman is, but somehow or another, our military can. Somehow our military knows the difference between a man and a woman. Kind of. There's a bit of a gray area there because we now allow mentally ill transgender people into the armed services, which is kind of weird because on a 4473, it's kind of frowned upon, right? But nevertheless, we are looking at women who have never had to enlist, or at least not enlist, I shouldn't say that, register for selective services, and this is being floated right now. Now, this is unlikely to pass the House. I want you to know that. This is not made into law. Not trying to spread rumors here. But it's obviously on somebody's to-do list. It's on the Democrats' to-do list. Not trying to make this about party politics, but I want you to hear me out on this. The same group of people who cannot identify the difference between a man and a woman, the same group of people that say that you can select what you want to be, the same group of people who always cry about a, quote, war on women and say that women can do everything better than men, are the same ones right now who are trying to say that women now need to be included in selective service, which means they could very well be drafted. If we went into war and we had a draft, if this were to go into law, women would be required to be part of that draft and would be called up just like any man would be called up that was military-aged man and now a woman. So why do you think this is? Why are we automating the process for having men register for the draft? And now why are we essentially, if this were to pass too, if both of these were to pass, we would be automating, because they would certainly pass this for women too, make it automatic for them as well. If they're eligible for the draft and they're eligible for the automation process. So why would we be making all military-aged Americans, men or women, eligible for the draft and make it an automatic registration? Could it be that we have a little bit of a slump in our recruitment into the military services? Is that a possibility? It absolutely is. In fact, it's an absolute truth. The military recruiting outlook is grim indeed. Loss of public confidence, political attacks, and the economy are all taking a toll. Now, this article was very interesting to me. It's military.com. So you are going to see a very slighted, opinionated group of comments coming from a government paid employee who will not and does not want to admit the truth, right? Now, all of this information is coming from this chick Warmoth, who is the head of the Army. When mentions of wokeness were brought up, and that was the biggest term that was used whenever they talked about why military recruitment was down, the head of the Army pushed back and said that nobody knew what they were talking about. Warmoth pushed back on the notion that the Army has gone, quote, woke in its efforts at diversity and inclusion, which allegedly have taken resources away from training and deployment. Again, this is a military website pushing the military agenda right now of wokeness. That's why they are discrediting this and acting like wokeness is not a problem. But they sure spent a lot of time talking about it. She said the wokeness charges stemmed from the hyper-partisan political climate gripping the nation, challenged the critics to come see firsthand how the Army trains. I'll pass on that. And this is the part that got me the most, because they were quick to pass the buck away from wokeness onto other things as if they had no control over them. The military also has to contend with drawing recruits from a stressed out society, according to the latest Stress in America survey conducted by the Harris Poll for American Psychological Association and released in November. Quote, the COVID-19 pandemic, global conflicts, racism, and racial injustice, inflation, and crime-related disasters are all weighing on the collective consciousness of Americans. So they're blaming things on racism. People aren't signing up to the military because of racism. Well, it might be because the military, to a certain degree, is making it specifically about each person. Those of you who've been in the military, you know that the, I guess, overwhelming goal within the military is functioning as a unit, right? One person is not more important than the entire unit. You don't single out each individual person. That's why when you go in the military, they don't allow you to have a, quote, identity, so to speak. Your head is shaved bald. You are all going to wear the exact same clothes, the same shoes. You eat the same food. You live in the same quarters because you are all treated equally and you were treated as a team, a cohesive unit, not as an individual person. But whenever you introduce wokeness and the racial overtones of white people are bad, what you wind up with is you start making people more important and more special based on what they are. Woman, very special. Black, special. Any kind of Hispanic, Asian, whatever, special. White male, bottom of the barrel, right? That's how it is, and that's what is pushed upon them. You can try to say that I'm wrong, but you better post some links because we all know that I'm right about this. I know the truth hurts sometimes, and sometimes it's hard to swallow that truth because your tribalistic party that you were part of is getting the benefits, and you don't want to admit that you're getting an upper hand, that you're getting a head start, right? So I know it's hard to swallow sometimes, but it's an absolute fact, and we all know this. That's why they actually push these programs like this, because it is giving somebody an unfair advantage. The military is implementing that same type of stuff and tearing down that whole structure of a team and making it about individuals now. Well, people don't want that. You don't form a brotherhood like people have done in the past in the military by each individual person being better than the next one, depending on what they are. Not what they do, what they are. It's not based on merit, it's based on race and other stupid little things. My goodness, if you're a one-legged black transgender person and you enter the military, you might be a 4-star general in a freaking week. This slide was my favorite. Talk about a reflection of today's day and time. In addition, the Defense Department estimates that only 23% of Americans aged 17 to 24 would qualify for military service, and the rest would be rejected for being overweight, abusing drugs, or having mental and physical health problems. Wow. I'm laughing because it's freaking sad. Our military defends us. Thank God we rely on technology now more than manpower in the military, but we still need boots on the ground in some cases, right? Not every single conflict is going to be fought without putting some boots on the ground, and only 23% of Americans would qualify for the physical necessities required to be a foot soldier? That's pathetic, guys. That's freaking pathetic. We should be ashamed of ourselves as a country, and most of us are, at the product that we're putting out there. Now, other things that are contributing to low recruitment in the military is the COVID stuff. Remember the mandates that they put out there? Remember they kicked people out of the military who refused to take an experimental shot? Remember they wouldn't let you sign up in the military unless you took the experimental shot? Well, they've rescinded all that now. Secretary of Army Christine Wormuth, that's the same chick that was talking about the "we are not woke" bull crap on the previous slides. She's issued a memorandum today that rescinds all policies associated with DoD COVID-19 vaccination mandates, but she cannot let it go. Still, quote, "I am proud of the efforts the Department of the Army has taken to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Quote, we will continue to promote and encourage COVID-19 vaccines for all personnel to ensure readiness, facilitate mission accomplishment, and protect the force." So we have an experimental shot that we know is experimental. We also know it doesn't prevent you from getting the virus. It doesn't prevent you from spreading the virus, and it does not save your life. We also know that the people that she's talking about are from ages 18 to 25. The people who are least susceptible to this virus. The people who the virus does not affect. The same people who were dropping dead because their hearts were exploding from getting the shot that she is still promoting and encouraging amongst a group of people who don't need it. And you wonder why people aren't signing up. Maybe people don't want their hearts to explode whenever they don't need something in their 20s. Possible. Now, what else could be a detergent? Lab meat for soldiers. Up to $500 million earmarked by the Department of Defense for cell culture meat research development. Look at the date, June 14th, just a couple of days ago. This is being pushed in the NDAA. Also, as far as making our military people eat experimental meat, that, by the way, is not approved by the FDA. Now, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in the FDA anyway, but if they haven't approved meat like this that's supposed to be sustainable and all kind of good for the environment, this lab-made meat, then if they haven't approved it yet, something's got to be wrong with it, right? Because they're the ones that are quick to want to do that. A government agency always wants to approve another government agency's thing if it falls within their agenda. And they haven't yet. There's a reason for that. This was a little bit interesting to me too. These cell-cultured products are neither vegetarian nor vegan, leaving few consumer groups demanding the products. So you're making this, it's not going to be vegan or vegetarian, so they're not going to want it. Do you think meat eaters want this? No. Give me a big chunk of cow. Let me throw a moo cow on my grill. Give me some chicken. I don't care if it took 2 or 3 weeks for you to shove this thing full of all kinds of steroids and make it grow in a quarter of the time that a chicken normally grows. Give me a chicken. I don't want cell-cultured garbage on my grill that looks like a little chicken nugget that you manufactured. Give me the friggin' chicken. Give me the cow. Give me the turkey. And while the products are touted as more environmentally sustainable and ethical, she says the claims are certainly suspect. Look at the next paragraph. They won't allow third-party sources to go in and collect the data they need to conduct a full life cycle assessment. So we don't know if it's more environmentally friendly, but we do know it's very energy intensive and water intensive. Now, you know, there's a whole nother video that we can make about the livestock industry. There's a huge battle going on right there. And everything from the ear tags they're trying to mandate, and I think they have mandated that in cattle, the electronic devices that go in the ear so they can track cattle, and supposedly it's for disease purposes, but it has nothing to do with that. It doesn't prevent disease. I mean, it absolutely doesn't. It's simply for tracking purposes, more expenses on the cattle farmers, and to make it harder on everybody. So between them doing that, and the cattle farmers are actually getting rationed on their water use. Now with this cell-made meat, it requires a bunch of water to make this meat. It's mostly water related, cooling things down, mixing with the product and all of that. So it requires a ton of H2O. So in the same areas that they're actually mandating the cattle farmers use less water, they're allowing these fake meat people to use more water to make their fake meat products. So very sketchy and weird stuff going on there that we're picking a side. And there is, according to this article, no proof that there is anything beneficial with this lab-made meat. So like I mentioned earlier, woke ideology undermines military readiness in various ways. It undermines cohesiveness by emphasizing differences based on race, ethnicity, and sex. It undermines leadership authority by introducing questions about whether promotion is based on merit or quota requirements. Read that quota requirement. If there is a requirement based on skin color and gender, then that means that you are mandated to fill that and make that promotion to somebody who may not be getting it based on merit. I'm sure both of them carry some weight, but if you have a tiebreaker, the quota fulfillment will certainly supersede the merit. It leads to military personnel serving in specialties in areas for which they are not qualified already. And of course, it takes time and resources away from the training activities and weapons development that contribute to readiness. We've actually had proof that the wokeness doesn't work as far as equity. In 2015, then Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus rejected out of hand a Marine Corps study concluding that gender-integrated combat formations did not move as quickly or shoot as accurately, and that women were twice as likely as men to suffer combat injuries. He rejected it because it did not comport with the Obama administration's political agenda. Not because he could dispute it, because it did not align itself with what their agenda was, so they dismissed it. That same year, they opened all combat jobs in the U.S. military to women. And Secretary of Defense Ashley Carter committed to gender-neutral standards to ensure that female service members could meet the demanding rigors involved in qualifying for combat. After finding that women were not scoring as highly as men and under fierce pressure from advocacy groups, the Army threw out the test. Now there is no test to determine whether any soldier can meet the fitness requirements for combat specialties. If you get wounded in a field of battle and you have a 98-pound chick standing next to you, I don't care how good your gear is. I don't care how equal she feels. I don't care the feelings that anybody has, any advocacy group, the President of the United States, whomever. I don't care what their feelings are. When you have a 190-pound man trying to get, he's wounded, dead weight, trying to get hauled off the battlefield and behind a rock or to safety from a 90-pound woman, I think we know how that's going to end. Now we're going to need 2 body bags, not just the one. Another thing that you can guarantee had a little bit of a play as far as people not wanting to join the military is the allowance of gender dysphoria, mentally ill people to enter into the military. In 2015, near the end of his second term, Obama initiated a change to the Pentagon's longstanding policy on transgender individuals in the military. Before that change could take effect, the incoming Trump administration put it on hold, awaiting future study. Subsequent evidence presented to Secretary of Defense James Mattis, including the fact that transgender individuals suffering from gender dysphoria attempt suicide and experience severe anxiety at 9 times the rate of the general population, raised legitimate concerns about their fitness for military service. That led the Trump administration to oppose reasonable restrictions on military service by those suffering gender dysphoria. Again, this is a mental condition that is outlined in the DSM-5 book. But only hours after his inauguration in January 2021, President Biden signed an executive order that did away with these restrictions and opened military service immediately to all transgender mentally ill individuals. Since then, the Biden administration has decreed that active members of the military can take time off from their duties to obtain sex change surgeries and all related hormones and drugs at taxpayer expense. And you're still wondering why recruitment numbers are down. Now, no one, including Biden supporters, actually believe Biden is competent and can do anything, but nevertheless, they still support this man. Wokeness also comes in a form of conflating the mission of the military with environmental ideology. A year ago, President Biden told a group of overseas Air Force airmen that the Joint Chiefs of Staff had determined that the greatest threat facing America was global warming. I was told by the same old guy that white supremacy was the greatest threat to America. Now we're talking about global warming? And I thought we didn't call it global warming anymore. I thought it was climate change now. Moving target, I get it. But nevertheless, this is another piece of, can you imagine talking to a group of people that come from all walks of life, and everything you do is based on your own single political ideology, never realizing that there's way more than even just 2 ideologies out there. There's people who believe all sorts of different things, not just 2 different sides of it. There's all kinds of in between and even outside of that. Imagine being scolded and preached to all the time from the top down about one political ideology. Wouldn't that seem like and feel like brainwashing to you? Knowing full well that you grew up 18 years in a community, in a household, and believed a totally different set of values, and now you go into the military thinking this is a team effort. You're treated different because you're a white male or a black male or a white woman. You're treated differently than everybody else, and you start seeing that. It unravels everything you were taught to believe as you grew up, right? And then all of a sudden you have this same political ideology hammered into your brain the whole time you're there. It would make you tell the next guy, I don't think this military is for you. One more example of why people are probably getting the news that I don't want to be in your military. Last month, Ramstein Air Base in Germany scheduled a drag queen story hour at its base library where drag queen Stacy Teed was scheduled to read to children. They say drag queen Stacy Teed as if I'm supposed to know who that is. when lawmakers back home got wind of the event and wrote to the Secretary of the Air Force, the event was canceled. Again, you wonder why the good people, the people who really would do a good job and bolster our military, don't want to join the military. Your recruitment numbers are down 40 to 60% depending on what branch it is. Nobody's wanting to join your military. Why am I bringing all this up? Why do I mention that, number one, our recruitment numbers are down? Number two, the legislators in Washington, D.C. now are trying to pass new laws out there that are going to expedite the signing up and registration of people for the draft. And now we're going to include, potentially, women to sign up for the draft. Why does that matter? Okay, let's take a look and see if you can maybe fill in some of the blanks. Biden, help Ukraine now or send Americans to fight Russia with NATO later. In December, President Joe Biden delivered his sternest warning yet to congressional Republicans, balking at approving more aid to Ukraine. Pay up now or you'll pay more later. Forced to send U.S. troops to fight Russian soldiers when an emboldened Russian President Vladimir Putin moves in on a NATO member country. Now, again, to not get too much off into the weeds in this, because this is a very deep subject on Ukraine, is Ukraine is not currently a NATO member. If they were and they get attacked, all NATO members at that point have to fight back against the aggressor, which is Russia in this case. Joe Biden is implying there's no reason to believe that this would be true or that this may happen, but Joe Biden is implying that Poland is, that's the country he's talking about. He doesn't name them, but Poland has been talked about as being one of the closer countries and possibly being invaded by Russia. Russia has shown no signs of invading Poland. Are they happy with Poland? No, because Poland's helping Ukraine. But Russia has not said next up on the list is Poland. So Joe Biden is trying to use propaganda here to say that if you don't give me more money to give to Ukraine, Russia might invade Poland, and then all of a sudden we have to draft Americans and send them overseas to fight with NATO, right? Now, make no mistake, we've already got boots on the ground in Ukraine. They say like 150, that's BS. We know better than that. We've got lots of people already there. Let's not be naive to think that somehow or another that we don't have ground troops already there. I mean, again, they're calling them trainers, but again, we know better. But we don't have a huge number like Afghanistan and Iraq over there yet. Now, why am I talking about recruitment problems with the U.S. military and Ukraine? Here's why. Moscow's troop strength inside Ukraine currently exceeds 400,000 soldiers, with another 100,000 near Ukrainian territory. Overall, Kyiv has around 680,000 active military personnel, with around 200,000 on the front lines. Russia, meanwhile, has 1.2 million. So there's 1.2 million in Russia compared to Ukraine's 680,000, about double of that. Ukrainian Army General Staff said last year they feared Russia could be considering mobilizing 400,000 to 700,000 additional troops. In December, Zelensky said 450,000 to 500,000 extra soldiers would be needed to resist Russia in 2024, this year. So that means they're going to be looking to call up 450,000 to 500,000, 500,000 people that they're wanting to bring into the military in Ukraine to fight the Russians. There might be a problem with that. Draft dodging plagues Ukraine as Kyiv faces acute soldier shortage. Ukraine needs to draft many more men for a battlefield that is chewing up bodies, but authorities are conflicted over whether to cajole or coerce and fear the political fallout if they choose the latter. Since the Russian invasion 2 years ago, around 9,000 draft evasion proceedings have opened up. This is into the Ukrainian courts. But that's just scratching the surface of the draft dodging and the evasion of registration, so enlistment notices can't be issued. Remember, they have a similar system to us where they are required to register. I find it kind of odd that we are now looking at what Ukraine is doing and we're making our registration mandatory and automatic now, right? It's already mandatory, but now they're making this automatic. Kind of like we're watching what's going on and going, okay, we can't let that happen here. And there's other reasons too. The BBC recently reported that 650,000 Ukrainian men of fighting age have fled the country in the past 2 years. So they need 500,000. And they've lost more than 500,000. Fighting age men have left the country of Ukraine. They need less than what's already left. And people are still leaving. There's reports that the, quote, recruitment folks from the Ukrainian army stop fighting age men in they go to different cities over there, and they'll stop them on the street and question them. Have you registered? They see this and they're harassing these people. There's fights that have broken out in various cities over there as well from these same recruitment people going to fighting age men and asking them about their registration status. Now, regarding drafting and bringing in more people, calling them up into the Ukrainian military, they say that that's highly unpopular. Truth be told, mobilization is a hot political potato, and no one wants to be holding it. The army needs many more people, but Zelensky doesn't want to take responsibility for the mobilization and says it is up to government ministries, and they're afraid of getting their hands burned and say it is up to the parliament, which then passes the buck back. So get this. We have a country who has been invaded, and they're killing hundreds of thousands of their troops right now, taking over their cities. Russia invading Ukraine, right? This shows you the evilness, the selfishness, and the narcissism involved in politics. This is all over the world, obviously not just here in the United States, although we lead the pack in it. Here's a group of politicians. Let's equate it to our own political system over here. You've got your Zelensky, essentially our Biden, who doesn't want to call up the military, institute a draft to pull more people into the army, although they need 400,000 to 500,000 now. He doesn't want to do that for political reasons. So he kicks it to, let's call them, their Congress. Congress doesn't want to do it either because they're worried about not getting reelected, because it's a bad thing, right? Might piss off a couple of family members and they cast a vote to the opposition party. So they don't want it and they kick it back to Zelensky. They're going back and forth. This is all in the name of being reelected. Meanwhile, their country is literally being invaded and burned to the ground, and they don't want to call their own citizenry up simply because they're afraid they might not get reelected. They're more worried about their own seat than they are worried about their own freaking home. That's the poison of politics. So why does all this matter and how does it come together? China attacks on Philippine boats are to provoke U.S. prep for Taiwan war, expert warns. What arrival of Russian warships in Cuba means, according to retired U.S. Air Force Colonel. I mentioned at the beginning of the video the hot time that we have leading up to the election. We also have other world leaders who see what's happening in the United States. Obviously, everybody's paying attention with what's happening in the United States. They see a weak government. They see a government not willing to do anything. They saw Obama, and they are assuming, just like we are, that Obama is the one calling the shots behind the scenes. They saw Obama draw a red line and watch everybody else step over it, and we did nothing. So they know we have the same puppet government right now in the White House. So all these world leaders see our weakness, and they see the potential of Trump winning, as numbers are kind of falling out now, showing that. So I feel like there's a heightened sense of awareness for them to close that gap and take what they can take now under Biden, because the United States won't do anything about it. You've got China over there jacking with us in the Philippines, Taiwan, everywhere else. China's testing us, but China owns Joe Biden. So they know Joe Biden's not going to do anything to China during this time. So now would be a perfect time for China to invade Taiwan and keep jacking with us out on the open seas. Same thing with Russia. Russia's testing us. You don't think they put their warships 60 miles off the Florida coast for a reason? That was a message being sent. All of this matters because between our recruitment numbers being down, us panicking to try to institute automatic draft sign up now, making women available for the draft, Ukraine short on soldiers because they're either dying or leaving the country, escaping their country, Joe Biden threatening to send our troops to fight in Ukraine, and all this other stuff by China and Russia happening. This is a vital time for us. I don't think, what do we have? July, August, September, October, November, and then obviously December, January. I don't know that we can wait 8 months for the new president to get in to unravel all the garbage that we're seeing in this wicked political knot that the Biden administration has tied up. And what does this have to do with gun owners? Guys, just like with law enforcement, you are your own first responder. If anyone from another country wanted to do Americans harm, now's the time to do it. Our border is wide open, the southern border. I'm sure the northern border is not much better. They're catching ISIS people coming over the southern border left and right. Not to mention the South Americans, Central Americans, and Mexicans who are raping and killing and robbing all over the country from coast to coast. You better watch out. And I say we, I'm not talking about tough guys. I'm talking about people willing to protect themselves and their family. It's a dying breed. Now, you guys are still raising young men out there to be the ones that will be the tip of the spear one day. I talk all the time about children, mentoring young people, and all that. I think this is a critical time. While I certainly would not encourage my son or my daughter to go into the military because of all the problems that they currently have, I would certainly be training them on ways to look out for mom and dad, your brothers and sisters, and the rest of your family. I think this is a super critical time in everybody's lives right now. I think there's so much going on that it's easy to get us distracted and not look at the ball, not keep your eye on the prize. And I think this is a time that we kind of have to refocus. All these things I talked about in this video, I do not believe are coincidences that are just happening separate from one another. I do think they're all tied together. I do think there is an intent at some point, because of our dwindling service member numbers, that they're looking at that and they're looking at things that they plan to do or would like to do in the near future, and they're realizing we may not have the manpower for it.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.